I'm in Conway Hall's library and I'm surrounded by books. But there won't be a single person out there who likes every book in this collection. So why is it that we all have such differing tastes when it comes to reading material, films, TV shows, music and art? What makes our tastes so different? Why, for example, are Robin, Josie and the rest of the Book Shambles crew always recommended Carl Sagan and never David Icke? I'm here with Dean Burnett, author of The Happy Brain. So Dean, we obviously have very different tastes. Different people like different things. Why is that?
Well, you've got to take into account the fact that every single human brain is massively unique. Like the example I use is everyone has unique fingerprints. Like that's over 7 billion people with unique fingerprints. That's a tiny pattern of lines on a bit of skin. It was how complex the brain can get. 100,000 billion neurons and all the connections that they have. So everyone's going to be different for a start. But it really depends on like so many different factors. Like how are you raised? What are you exposed to when you're a child? Like I always reference the fact that I grew up in a very small rural valley, very quiet, very tiny little place and not really many crowds. So I find very big cities and big buildings, I often still find them quite intimidating, whereas some people come visit me back where I come from and they find the quiet and the hush just maddeningly oppressive. But both exactly the same thing. It's comforting to me and not to them. It just depends on what you're used to. But also we end up developing a sort of model of how the world works, and like we think, right, this is what the world should look like based on our experiences and all our understandings, our attitudes, our beliefs and all of that. And then when we encounter something which sort of conforms to that, we tend to like that a bit more because it reassures us. We encounter something which doesn't conform to that, we sort of reject it because it doesn't really, it makes us feel a bit uneasy, like, well, what if we're wrong? And it's harder for something like that to break through. So we tend to stick to things we are more familiar with and sort of avoid things which aren't. And you also have the basic things, like, something triggers the reward pathway or something you associate something positive with. There's the generalization effect. So similar things will have a similar effect, and like very more different things will have a negative effect. It's sort of like when you have, like with Pavlov's dogs, conditioned to one tone, they get the response, like one particular tone, they learn that means food, but similar tones will provoke a similar saliva response, and humans are kind of similar in that respect.
So does that mean that I could change my taste? I, for example, really dislike experimental jazz. Mm-hmm. Is that just because I haven't listened to enough of it? If I forced myself to sit down and listen to it, would I start liking it?
Possibly. You may also grow to deeply resent it even more, because I don't know what conditions happened to you whereby you've been sat and forced to listen to experimental jazz. So in my head, it's sort of like a Clockwork Orange thing, where someone holding your ears open, not your eyes, but not that would be relevant, because that's not how ears work. But that is probably a weird example too, because if you look at the Professor Morton Crinklebaum and his Hedonia Institute, they research a lot of things which cause us pleasure, and they do a lot of work on music and basic sort of very simple tunes, very predictable rhythms. They don't have much of a positive reaction in the brain, whereas something too chaotic, like experimental jazz, similar thing. It's like there has to be, apparently it's all down to do with syncopation. Too much or too little syncopation causes a response, whereas like most pop music or most modern music, that's the sort of sweet spot of it's predictable but not too predictable. It's complex enough to
so it's not boring.
Yes, not boring.
But you can kind of work out where it's trying to go.
Exactly. On one side you've got a metronome, one extreme is like tick, 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 nothing there. The other side you've got experimental jazz, like, tumbler dryer full of saucepans, and that's not really what you want either. So, the sweet spot is in the middle. So you could end up becoming sort of more denatured to it. You could habituate to it. You listen to it a lot to the point where you think, well, I'm sort of bored of that now. You categorize it as, that's a thing that I've listened to a lot. Nothing happened when I listened to it. So your brain habituates. You just think, okay, so that's a thing then. It's like when you get into a hot bath. At first it's like, ooh, I don't know about this. Then your body goes, okay, it's hot now. And then I'll stop paying attention to this particular stimulus and think about something else. So the brain, it needs to be sort of surprising enough and novel enough to keep us engaged with it. So if it comes to the point where you become sort of familiar with the overall tone or essence of it, it depends how experimental the jazz is, I guess. If it is completely different every time, you probably wouldn't be too...
But there are some people who love experimental jazz and music that to other people sounds like chaos. is there something different going on in their brains? Are they kind of hearing a pattern that I'm not hearing, or do they just enjoy the chaos?
It could be a case of that. It could be like they have sort of certain neural networks which perceive this underlying structure, or maybe it's the fact they're actually trying to find it is part of the rewarding thing. People like to put effort into things. People like to be stimulated. Like, there's a whole thing about internal, external motivation. Internal is supposed to be more potent, more lasting. Because if someone pays you to do something, that's external motivation. You'll do it until you get paid and then you'll stop. Whereas if you do something for the love of it, internal motivation, you'll keep doing it. That's why people keep plugging away at their chosen art forms or their chosen passions. Case in point. So there may be some people who enjoy trying to decipher the underlying the chaos for the patterns. It could be that some people have their brains worked in certain ways where it is enjoyable to them. Like everyone is different, and maybe that level of syncopation is what they like. I mean, they need more. It's sort of similar, because I did comedy and have been doing comedy for many years, when asked, which again is rare these days, because people have seen me do it now. But when you do comedy, when you study it, when you perform it, it becomes actually a lot harder for regular comedy to make you laugh, because you're more aware of the approaches. You're like, oh, I see what that is. This is a pullback and reveal. This is a setup for a later joke. This is going to come back later. It's sort of like you can see behind the magician. You can see what he's doing. You can see where the hands are going. And the misdirection doesn't work that way. So if you're more into it, then you need sort of a bigger hit in order to keep you interested.
So they're jazz junkies.
Quite possibly, yes. I don't know the jazz scene. I don't know how heavily narcotics are involved, but I'm guessing some must be part of it. All music is, surely. Even choral music, especially choral music. Not incense.
So a lot of the time we're trying to kind of predict what's going on, and how much does that kind of ability to predict what's going to happen influence how much we enjoy something? Is that something that varies from person to person? Some people like more predictable outcomes, some people like more of a twist.
Yeah, I think that, again, it's always going to be individual variations. You do neuroscience, you know how that works. Like every psychology experiment is a minefield of, is this a real thing, or is it just randomly we found 3 random exceptional people, or exceptional, under-exceptional people, or like the subpar, anyway. I ran a few studies, I got disappointed. I've become disillusioned with the whole thing. But it is, the human brain seems to have, I think all brains, but we talk about humans, because that's the more complex one. This sort of, but like the syncopation, it's best if there's a certain amount of familiarity and novelty. Because you look at the reward pathways, the anterior cingulate, the striatum, seems to be like these parts of the brain which anticipate reward, which think, right, there's something's going to happen, it's going to be good. Because obviously we can plan ahead, we can anticipate things, that's a perfectly normal brain function. And things which are novel, they tend to provoke more of a response in these reward anticipation areas. Things which are unfamiliar, they cause us to like them more. Like that's why, certainly with jokes and stuff, but if you have a song which you've heard before many, many times, you still like it, but the first time you hear it, you'll go, oh wow.
See, I'm not sure that's true. Like, I go to quite a lot of gigs, and generally you get the biggest response from the crowd from the hit. And, the album tracks do okay, and then when the band plays something new, you get much less a response. It seems like people are enjoying that big hit, the one that they know, more than the new stuff.
Yeah, but that's with a familiar, sort of established band. So if you are like, if you've never seen them before, there'll be some songs which you go, oh, right, that's a good one, and some like that's not such a good one. But then if you have people who follow these bands, like they have huge followings now, then that becomes part of your worldview. Like you're involved now, which throws the equation out of whack and becomes more of a, this is the one I like, I identify with this song, this one's for me, that one I don't know. But it actually comes down to the familiarity versus novelty thing again, because sometimes if you've not experienced something before, the more familiar stuff will be, if it's all novel, the more familiar stuff will be more stimulating. And I think it's sort of, you need to have this nice balance between the two. It's like, they did mouse studies where there's a difference between neophobia, afraid of new stuff, and neophilia, novelty exploration. They have novelty preference. Like some creatures, when given 2 objects, just neutral objects to look at, one's unfamiliar, they'll go to that one first, thinking, no, is this edible? Is this something for food? It's good to know what this new thing is. But they'll be far more likely to show novelty preference if they're in a familiar setting. So like, I'm currently safe, there's no danger here, I'll look for the new thing. Whereas if it's like completely new around them, new thing, oh, could kill me, I'll avoid that. So it's not too ridiculous, I think, to extrapolate that into humans. Like, so that's why, I think that's why franchises like currently now, the Avengers film is becoming so big. New film, there's so many familiar faces. So they think, I know what that is, I know what that is, I know who that is, I know what they do, but I want to see these familiar people do new things. Because I know I like them already, and now I see novel twists on it. Like a lot of songs you like, if there's a remix, that tends to go quite well, or a cover version.
Unless
like,
they ruin it.
Well, of course, yeah, that can happen too. My old school friend Alan, he got absolutely obsessed with Eiffel 65's Blue.
Oh,
Maybe the only human to ever do that. He bought every single remix going.
Oh, God.
And there were like 30 of them. It's really weird.
Why?
I don't know. Speaking of people who like different things, but just that one song. No, he wasn't an Eiffel 65 fanboy, that particular one song.
Did they have any other songs?
I don't think they ever did.
No.
So maybe there was, but I think it was all the same videos which everyone hated. So yeah, that was a weird summer.
I guess people kind of know what to expect with certain movies. You know that if you go to see a rom-com, there's going to be an arc, something's going to go wrong for the couple, but eventually they're going to come back together and it's all going to be fine. And I guess an Avengers movie is kind of similar. You kind of know what's coming. Do you think that's why there's been some really big controversies around, in particular, there was a movie that came out recently called Mother, which was a very strange film. Trent made me watch it as preparation for this interview, and it's just really weird. I can understand why a lot of people didn't like it.
I don't take that personally, but okay. Indeed, it's a really weird film, which no one likes. Watch it.
But the thing is, people did like it as well. Trent loves it, and some of the critics did as well. And perhaps one of the issues is that it's a very hard film to describe or to make a trailer for. So if you watch the trailer, it looks like it's going to be a sort of psychological thriller of some kind, and then it isn't. Well, it sort of is, but it's also not. And do you think that if people were expecting to see a kind of straightforward psychological thriller with Jennifer Lawrence, they kind of knew what they were in for, or they thought they did, and then they kind of got given something completely different? Do you think that could have led to why a lot of people didn't enjoy it?
Yeah, I think there's definitely an element of that, in that if you was told, like, here is a ham sandwich, and you bite it and it's cheese, and like that isn't, I mean, you should check first, obviously, but it's like, that's going to be, I think that there's that as well, like you have anticipations that they are thwarted, which people don't like. It causes uncertainty. At an instinctive level, the brain doesn't like that, in terms of, I don't know what's going on. That's an inherently uncomfortable sensation for any typical human brain, because it's like, I cannot anticipate what's going to happen, therefore something bad happens, I don't know what to do about it, I will have no defenses prepared. So uncertainty generally has this negative effect on them, not massively so, but gives a sense of unease, a sense of anxiety. The threat detection mechanism is geared up, thinking, right, don't know what's going on, let's stay on high alert. So it does make you uncomfortable, and uncertainty, it causes elements of stress. It's like when you see news about the economy is not doing well, and you know you work in a precarious industry, like, am I going to lose my job? Even though nothing's happened to you directly, but you still get this uncertainty because you don't know what's going to happen.
It's sort of like a loss of control, isn't it? And that's one of the biggest problems with stress.
Yeah, loss of control, locus of control, autonomy. You need all these things to know you can affect the environment to keep yourself safe. When you lose that sense, then that becomes stressful. But also in that case of Mother and the trailer you said, like, if people were shown this trailer and then they invested money in seeing something and were not given what they paid for, that technically feels like you've been lied to, you've been manipulated, you've been tricked. If someone tells you a joke, that's an attempt to manipulate you. It's sort of saying, I want to induce laughter in you, and it's a bad joke and you have failed. So like, oh, how dare you? You think I would have laughed at that? And I think there's an element of an attempt at manipulation there. So like, comedians stood on stage telling their jokes. They are in a position of dominance. They think, I'm in charge of this room here. Might even do the power stance, the whole wide leg thing, because they've read bad research, and thinking, yes, I'm in charge here, I'm going to make you laugh. That's like the social contract that's been made. People like have this idea that comedy is just one big word which covers everything, whereas there's so many different types and styles and tastes and approaches. That's not recognised as much as it is with music, because music can clearly define it, and that's what that is.
And films generally come in genres, and if you're going to see an action genre, there'll be this. If you're going to see, which I guess because mother couldn't really be classified, categorised. It's sort of arty, I guess, is probably the best classification I would use for it.
I used pretty much the exact same thing when I did the launch event of my book, and Charlotte Church came along as a guest. She's in the book, and it was like it was a live event, so I had people there. But I said I told people she was coming, but I didn't big it up because I thought, well, if people come expect to see Charlotte Church and they get me, that's sort of like a rip-off. I said, if like you're going to see Avengers Infinity War and just 2 hours of Hawkeye whittling, that's not. It's technically part of the same universe, but it's not what you want, is it? That's going to be a disappointment. And I thought that would be the same thing. You come to expect to see Charlotte Church doing her music and singing stuff, and it's just me waffling on for hours. That's not what you paid a ticket for, and that people would have a right to be annoyed by that.
I guess this would kind of make sense from an evolutionary point of view, that it would be better for the species as a whole if there are some members that are keen to seek out new stuff, but not everyone, so that if that new thing is dangerous, not the whole population isn't going to get wiped out. So do we think we're born, some of us, with more novelty-seeking personalities?
Quite possibly, yeah. I mean, it wouldn't make sense for such a social creature as us. We're arguably the most social creature. We can live in population densities that would drive insects mad, somewhere like Cairo, even London, like in terms of people living in the area, that our densities outweigh most species. So we are the friendliest, even though everything you see online in the news would suggest otherwise. But there are 7 billion of us, and a lot of us don't kill each other, which is quite good going in terms of nature. But it comes to, so we probably will have people who are more novelty seeking, that is like thrill seeking as a personality type is sort of recognized in the psychiatric literature, and there's some evidence to suggest that they have fewer receptors in like the reward pathways, so they of certain types, of certain like D2 ones, but which would suggest they need more stimulation in order to achieve the same level of pleasure. Some argue actually it's more receptors, so they have they get much bigger highs of stuff, so they seek out more and more things, and so on. So yeah, there does seem to be a genetic element to it, but I think it depends on how old you are too, because I think it's in Susan Blakemore's book, Inventing Ourselves now, but I cover it in mine as well, in that when you hit adolescence, that's when your brain undergoes massive changes in terms of maturation, but the central part of your brain, like the limbic system, the more old school parts, like the ones we share with animals, they mature faster because they're sort of simpler and more established, whereas the higher cognitive functions, the frontal cortex with all the thinking and planning and reasoning and inhibitions, they mature slower. So there's a long period where the central bit, like the impulsive part of the brain, has more dominance, or is stronger, because we haven't developed the part of the brain which controls that yet. Hence, teenagers can be more risk-taking, because they're aware that things are risk. If you assess a teenager in a sort of a lab setting, they're fully aware of what constitutes a risk, what dangers are. They won't do something, but they're more prone, or they're more sensitive to emotional stimulation. So they think, I should say in and revise for my exams, but I want to go out and see people, meet friends and stuff. And then, of course, the parents stand in the way of that, and they become a barrier rather than a protector now, so they're all the headbutt in there. And it does look like it's like an accidental thing, but chimps show a similar thing, apes and lots of rats do. They have this adolescent phase, they become more risk-taking, novelty-seeking, and it seems to be an evolved thing to encourage the younger ones, like rather than stay in the home ground and sort of keep the gene pool small and clash with the elders, to go out, go further and seek other people and spread the genes wider, and learn new things, and maybe come back later if you want, but go forth and multiply, essentially, but not in the classic way that's meant. Or maybe it is, actually.
There's this idea that you can subjectively like or dislike something, but then there's also a kind of more objective truth as to whether it's a good movie or book or piece of music. How do you think we kind of can reconcile, I didn't enjoy that, but I can kind of appreciate that it is good art, for example?
Yeah, that's a really tricky one, I think, because art is so subjective. And I think a lot of it comes down to how much of an understanding you have about whatever the art form is. Like the example I made with comedy and stuff is like, if you can see someone like, many comedians say they don't like Michael McIntyre, but they can see what he does and he's very good at it. And I've similar thing like with surreal comedy, like I'm not a huge fan of that, but you can see you're doing a great job there, or crowd hosting or banter, like that's a skill I'll never have. I don't particularly need to or want to to develop it, but if someone else can do it, I can respect that, even though I don't find it especially amusing. And I think it also comes down to that in films and music too, because I've got no musical skills whatsoever. So if someone played me a tune which was considered amateur by some experts, I would go, oh, okay, that's fine. Or someone say it's brilliant, and oh, okay, that's also fine. It's like wine tasting, you know. Like I can tell the difference between a £5 bottle and a £30 bottle. Never gone higher than that. I'm assuming I could, but just a guess. But some people claim they can taste the difference between, you know, a 65 vintage and a 63 vintage. I mean, neuroscience studies suggest they can't because it's all made up.
If you dye white wine red, then they'll think it's, yeah.
But they think they can, and that's the difference. And I think a lot comes down to that in art as well, in that if you know how films work, if you can see what they've done, if you can see where the focus is put in here, if you're aware of the details and the minutiae, you can say, I did not enjoy this film, but it's clearly very well done. Like with a slasher film, I'm not into any torture porn, as they call it, at all. But if I were to sit down and watch something like Wolf Creek or whatever, I could say, well, it's a very well done scene. Like I can really see those tendons snap. You know, that's I can appreciate that as on an objective level, and that's well done. But I'm not enjoying it. So I think it depends on how well informed you are about the thing you're looking at. Because obviously we have this big bank of experiences that we use to make our decisions and our analysis and to dictate our reactions to things. So if you have a wealth of experience in this area, you'll be able to say, that's good, I didn't enjoy it, that's not, but I did like it. We all have guilty pleasures too, don't we? And I know this is bad for me, but I know this is like junk food. I know it's not good, but I'm still liking it. It still hits all the right buttons. So yeah, you can have, it's a different reaction to anything, really.
And I guess it's partly kind of what you think that art is for. Because if your kind of definition of a good film is a film that people get enjoyment out of, that would be very different from if your definition of a good film is one that makes people think differently or opens their mind or that kind of thing. So I guess that probably has an impact as well.
Yeah, exactly. What is it you're trying to do here? If you are, if I was to paint a picture thinking I'm going to put this in a gallery, just like sort of smiley face with two dots in it, that is rubbish. Like, people are telling me that's not a good painting. If it's something to make my son happy, so you can put it in the fridge, that is good. It works in that respect. So, but if some sort of Rembrandt came to my house and or Picasso did one of those pictures for my son, and he'd go, "What is this?" He would have no. It's a classic refrain, isn't it? My 5-year-old could do that. Well, why isn't your 5-year-old doing that then? Well, why aren't they? Why isn't your 5-year-old earning 6-figure sums? What's different about this compared to what your 5-year-old could do? It's an individual element to it. So yeah, it depends on what you're trying to do. But if you can detect the intention, that does tend to make a difference. Like I said about the whole manipulation thing, if you can think, someone here is trying to make a film which I can watch on a Saturday afternoon, like the Bond series is like that, isn't it? This is classic for a bank holiday Bond, and it's fun, something for dads to watch on a bank holiday. Great, ticks all the boxes there. But if you're trying to
plenty of casual misogyny.
Of course, yes. Like well, it wasn't that casual in the 60s, was it?
No, it wasn't.
It was very overt. But now they're making them sort of thinkers, isn't it? It's all like really, poor face, he's tortured inside now, and that is annoying the people who like Bond for the old stuff, like the Roger Moore wacky stuff. Now it's all serious and gritty, and you have to say with a gravelly voice now, because I don't know, that seems to be what you do with gritty stuff. But yeah, so it depends on what you're trying to do and what people think you're trying to do or how they perceive it.
Cool.
Just do a thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us, Dean. It was really interesting chatting to you.
Thank you.
And Dean's new book, The Happy Brain, is available now.